Everybody, welcome to the Spring-Summer 2022 edition of Book Buzz at Home, not to be compared to Book Buzz at the Library, Wine Bar, and Bistro. What just happened? Willie, why am I viewing your screen? Wow, what did you just do? Okay, hold on. That was new. Did everyone just see Willie's screen?
I just saw something that said,
we're going to edit that out of the video that's going up.
Okay, Cindy, I see 6 people. So I clicked where it said share screen, and obviously you got me. So
Okay,
I'm back to the 6 people, but that's okay. I can do with 6.
Okay, so I have fixed it so that nobody can share except me. That was exciting for a moment. Okay. Woo! I almost broke out into a cold sweat. So much for my being calm, cool, and collected about this program. Okay. That's all recorded. So Leah will have a really good time when she's watching this and she sees that little oops just happen. Okay. So let's start again. This is the Spring-Summer 2022 edition of Book Buzz, and we were at the Library, Wine Bar, and Bistro last Tuesday for 2 sessions that was, for those of you who've been at the Wallingford Victorian Inn, that's very special. Alas, it is no more. Choate bought it. We have no idea what Choate is doing in its renovation of it. We do think it will continue to be an inn for Choate, and that it is possible that we will be able to return there. But in the meantime, the Library Wine Bar was a lovely host. We set up in a semicircle around a fireplace. There was a nice spread. There were Gouveia wines, and we talked about what's happening in this current publication season and 20 notable titles. They all had to wait until the end of the program to grab the handouts, which you all got with several days to spare. Yours and theirs look very similar. Theirs, which I have a set of here, say Library, Wine Bar, and Bistro on them. Yours say at home. But there are 9 handouts of what are, because I did once upon a time know how to do math. There are 59 books in each handout times 9, that's 531 books. They're organized by genre. So while you have them all, you don't have to pay attention to them all if certain types of books are really not your thing. They are literary fiction, popular fiction, which are the what I used to call airport books, but now airport bookstores are better. The Baldaccis and the Pattersons and the John Grishams and the Daniel Steeles and stuff like that. There's mysteries and thrillers. There's a new, very new for spring, summer 2022 handout, Beach Reads, which was very popular. This is the time of year where we get all those books set on Nantucket and Cape Cod and the Carolina coast and Florida, the books that are easier to read, not heavy duty, that you would take with you away on vacation and that don't tax your brain too much. So there's a whole handout of Beach Reads this time. And then other fiction, which is a catch-all, which includes everything else. Short stories and essays are in a handout, biography and memoir, history and politics. I was brutal about this time. Last time we did Book Buzz, history and politics were split into 2, and each handout had 40. This is one 59-book handout, 2/3 history, 1/3 politics. I was brutal on the political side of things. I just thought we all needed that. And then other nonfiction, which is a big, broad catch-all. So you have these as PDFs. As you can see, I don't know if you can tell, this is 8.5 by 14. This is legal size paper. Unless your printer, I like the physical of this. I know some of you have just been looking at it. And I did also, my list is at work, but I made a list of the books I want to read out of these. I did it last weekend. And this is a cheat, not a cheat. This is just good library intel. When a book is on order, it's in our catalog. You don't have to wait for a book to come into the library to put it on hold. You only need it to show up in the catalog. So I can tell you that most of the books, the fiction, which is what I'm in charge of, through the end of April, most of the books in these handouts that are fiction through the end of April have been ordered already. Not all, but almost all. I'm getting there. And all of the big name books, we order the Pattersons, the Baldaccis, et cetera, 6 months ahead. So you don't have to wait. If you see something in here, check the catalog. And if it's on order, put it on hold. That's a little inside intel. Okay, so those are the
That's not the
handouts.
same with ebooks, is it? From
It's
the
not the
library?
same with ebooks.
No.
Thank
Okay.
you for asking that question. It's not
Yeah.
the same with ebooks. And we don't, as an individual library, decide what ebooks we're getting. That's a lion-wide, there's a committee.
Okay. Okay.
Hey, Cindy,
Yeah,
is this true for audiobooks too?
I actually purchase audiobooks, but yes, once they are on order, they're in the catalog and you can put them on hold.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, but not e-audiobooks. That's the same as ebooks. I don't mean to confuse you, but there's still a line between physical and electronic. If you want a physical copy of any of these handouts, and you do not have a printer that prints on legal size paper, just come into the library and ask. I've got tons of them sitting on my desk, or email me if you can't get in, and I'll figure out how to get them to you. Okay, don't hesitate about that. So the spring and summer season, publishing season, is very, very different in feel from the fall and winter publishing season. You know, we do Book Buzz twice a year. The fall and winter are when the publishers release the books that they want everyone to buy for holiday gifts. So the books that they most of the big books, and I have to tell you, I already know at least 10 books coming out in September and October and into November that are very likely contenders for 20 notables in September. And I'm surprised I know that many. Usually they keep it very quiet and then they do some big splash reveal. The spring and summer, although it has, as some of you have already said, if you've been looking at the handouts, you know it has great books. The heavy hitters often hold back until the fall. So I was as deliberate as I could be in figuring out which books to put in these handouts for you, and had a heck of a time deciding on 20 to talk to you about, because the pecking order of which ones are big is a little harder to discern. So the good news is I've been doing this for several years now, and I kind of have a feel about the books that speak to you or to speak to Wallingford. And so that's how I try to make my choices about the 20. Reminder on publication dates, the books in the handouts, if you haven't looked at them yet, just so you, right, they're organized in chronological order by publication date. So the newest are the ones coming out in March are first, and then alphabetical by title for the books that are coming out on the same day. You have a picture of the cover, if the cover has been released, the name of the book, the author, and then a one-sentence description, which depending on the category is easier said than done. Publication dates in the United States are Tuesdays, unless you're James Patterson, when publication dates are Mondays. I wish I knew why. I do not. His books come out on Mondays. Everyone else's comes out on Tuesdays. And for reasons I also don't know, the beginning of the month is a bigger slate of new books on Tuesdays than the end of the month. The period we are talking about tonight and the period covered in the handouts are March 1st, last Tuesday, through August 30th, which is a Tuesday and the last Tuesday before Labor Day weekend. I wish I could tell you that I have read all 20 books that we're going to talk about. I have made inroads with publishers. Publishers have library marketing committees, which is a relatively recent development. And if I email and say, I'd really love a sneak peek, a lot of the times I get a very positive response to that. Most of the what are called advanced reader copies are electronic, and I And I mean no disrespect for anyone who reads ebooks. That is great. Read whatever way you want. I need physical books. It's my thing. I need the feel, the turning the pages, the smell, the whole gestalt. And so
Yeah.
there are just fewer physical advanced reader copies, but I have read some of these books, and I will tell you when we get to a book I've read. The good news is that a lot of people are not like me, and they're fine reading ebooks. And so if you go on Goodreads right now, for example, and you type in the name of a book that I'm going to talk about that's coming out in May or June, you will see a lot of reviews already. And usually those people have made a deal. I will send you this advanced sneak peek if you commit to write a review. So even though I haven't read all these books, I've read a lot about all of these books. And so I think I can try to give you some decent feel, and you'll understand why I've selected them. Please interrupt me if I say something that you need clarification on. If you have read other books by an author I'm talking about, if you have an observation, something witty or clever to say, it's all good. Once I share my screen, I'm not going to be able to look at your wonderful faces. And I love having a moment to take a break and know what you're thinking. If you want to say something, but you don't want to interrupt me, use the chat. Use the chat in Zoom. And I will check the chat when we come back together at the end of the slideshow to talk a little bit. Does that all sound okay? Anyone have any questions before we begin? No? Yes? Okay. Okay. So I'm going to share my screen. So here we go. Here's book one. It is Margaret Atwood's Burning Questions, Essays and Occasional Pieces, 2004 to 2021, which was published last Tuesday. Margaret Atwood, I suspect most of you know who she is already, but just very briefly, she has written I think she's 81 years old, and she's written more than 50 works of fiction, poetry, essays, and even a few graphic novels. And I would say that if she's not the most famous living literary novelist in the English-speaking world, she's pretty darn close. She's probably best known these days for The Handmaid's Tale, which once she actually said she almost didn't write because she thought it was too far-fetched. And look where we are with that now. And its sequel, The Testaments, she's won the Booker Prize, which is the most prestigious fiction prize in the English-speaking world, twice. And she's been shortlisted 4 times. So she's a grande dame of literary fiction. This book is not fiction. It's a set of 50 essays that she's written since starting in after 9/11 and ending last year. The book is divided into 5 parts, and she covers all of the things you might expect to cover, and also some kind of fun personal things about herself and her life. She also lost in 2019, I believe, her long-term partner, and she writes about that very beautifully as well. She said, all she said is, it's been a wild ride so far, the 21st century. And this is not a short book. This is a 500-page book, but it's 50 essays. So I think there's something for everyone in this one. And because it's Margaret Atwood, it's going to be a big book. Oops, don't look at that. Book 2. Book 2 is The Invisible Kingdom, Reclaiming Chronic Illness by Megan O'Rourke, which also came out last Tuesday and was reviewed. For those of you who follow the New York Times book review, Sunday book review, as I do, this was reviewed quite glowingly in the book review yesterday. And happily for me, she was on Fresh Air with Terry Gross the night before Book Buzz at the Library Wine Bar, and several people had listened. So they went, "Ooh, I heard her." And we had a great chat about this. Megan O'Rourke is the editor of the Yale Review and a fairly well-known writer and poet. And this book opens as follows. I got sick the way Hemingway says you go broke, gradually and then suddenly. She was sick with hives, fatigue, brain fog, and night sweats for a decade. No doctor could really diagnose what was wrong with her. And she often was told that the root cause of whatever was wrong with her was psychological. And she says about that, it is a truth universally acknowledged among the chronically ill that a young woman in possession of vague symptoms will be in search of a doctor who believes she is actually sick. And I know people who've had that experience, and I suspect you know people. I hope one of those people is not you, but I suspect you know people who've gone through that as well. And so this book is part memoir, but part journalism, trying to get at the question of how we treat hard to understand medical conditions. And this is not, she's, I think, capitalizing, and I don't mean that in a negative way, but long COVID is one such chronic illness.
Right.
And it has become, no one that I'm aware of in the medical profession, I mean, I think there's universal agreement that there is such a thing as long COVID, and she is capitalizing on that to say, aha, there are other autoimmune disease, other chronic illnesses like long COVID that are out there. She's looking for a new paradigm to jumping on that long COVID, to go past the concept of germs cause disease, body overcomes disease model, and say there's something more holistic, there's something more going on here, and we need to talk about it. So this is a very well-timed book, and it's gotten a lot of attention already since it came out, and I thought it would be of particular interest to all of you. It's been reviewed very favorably. Okay, this is book 3. This came out today because James Patterson is one of the authors, so it came out on a Monday. James Patterson is not only in the popular fiction handout this time and every single time there's book buzz, several times. He's in Memoir for the first time. He wrote a memoir about his life, and it's called, unbelievably, James Patterson, because he couldn't come up with anything more clever. I'm sorry for anyone who's a James Patterson fan. I'm sorry. I salute you, and aren't you lucky that you have so much of his books to read? But this is not even the first time that he's been a 20 notable star, because a few years ago, he wrote a book with President Bill Clinton called The President is Missing, which was a mega bestseller, and I picked it as one of the notable 20s. This time, he's arguably teamed up with someone more famous and certainly more popular than President Bill Clinton, and that is the great Dolly Parton. So the two of them have written a book together called Run, Rose, Run. And if you've been, I think they were on Good Morning America this morning. I know they were on the CBS Sunday Morning yesterday. They are really having a grand old time doing a tour about this book. Apparently he called her up. He said he was a big fan of hers, and he had this idea, and so he called her. And she said, and I can just hear this, she said, come down to Nashville and let's see if we like each other. So he did, and they did. And so they decided to write this book. He said that he thinks that country music is a lot like storytelling. If you listen to the lyrics of a country music song, there's a story in there. And so the process of this was that he would write a bunch of pages and he would send them to her, and she would write a song based on those pages. And she sent him back the lyrics. He didn't hear the music, but she sent him back the lyrics to the song, and he incorporated those lyrics into what he was writing. So this is this book. She released a CD of all the songs that she wrote in connection with this book last Friday. The book came out today. It's already being turned into a movie. She is hoping to play one of the leads. I didn't even tell you what the book is about. The book is about two musicians. One is a jaded, older, iconic Nashville music star, and the other is a young, up-and-coming, very talented a star-to-be woman who has a dark past because it's a James Patterson novel. So that's what the book is about. That's all I know. It doesn't really matter. This is going to be very, very, very big, very big. I suspect it will debut at #1 on the New York Times bestseller list. If not next week, then the week thereafter, however long it takes, whatever iteration it takes to run through. And, you know, this could be a hoot, who knows? But it is sure to be a massive success. Book 4 is Booth by Karen Joy Fowler, which is coming out tomorrow. Karen Joy Fowler has been around for a while. She's written 6 novels and 3 short story collections. I'd say her two best known novels are the Jane Austen Book Club, which came out in 2004 and was a New York Times notable book and on the New York Times bestseller list for a long time. And her last novel, her most recent novel, We Are All Completely Beside Ourselves, which was shortlisted for the Booker in 2014 and won the 2014 Penn Faulkner Award for Fiction and is wonderful. And if you haven't read it, I highly recommend it. This new book, Booth, is getting a ton of interest and is on the cover of the March issue of Book Page. If you've been in the library, you've seen that. And this is, if you're thinking, is this a book about John Wilkes Booth? And are you kidding? It's actually a book about John Wilkes Booth, and I'm not kidding. What you may or may not know is that John Wilkes Booth's father was a very, very successful Shakespearean actor. And he and his wife in 1822 moved from England to America and into a cabin 30 miles outside of Baltimore that was very remote, and had 10 children together over the course of the next 16 years. Just stop for a second and think about that. And John Wilkes Booth was the 9th of those 10 children. So they lived for a fair bit of time in this kind of remote world of just this family. They were liberal, they were vegetarians, they were very anti-slavery. Junius Booth's, the patriarch's father, was actually very involved in the Underground Railroad. And yet, as the country started to shift towards civil war, the family came out of this remote cabin and into society, and they became a very well-known theatrical family. And somewhere along the way, John Wilkes Booth became devoted to the Southern cause. And we all know sort of what happened from there. So this is what this book is about. And it's about this family. It is told from the perspectives of the siblings about what it was like to grow up and how things evolved. And it is just getting all kinds of buzz. I think this is going to be a doozy, and it's coming out tomorrow. Also coming out tomorrow, why didn't it move? Hold on. Interesting. Give me a minute. Hold on a second. Hi, everyone.
Hi.
I want to figure out why that happened, because it all of a sudden stopped working and it was going so well. Okay, I'm going to try it again. There we go. There we go. Yay. Okay. Book 5 which is coming out tomorrow, is In Love by Amy Bloom. This one I've read, and this one has been reviewed twice so far in the New York Times. It was in yesterday's book review, and it was also reviewed last week by Dwight Garner. Both reviews were glowing. Amy Bloom lives in Stony Creek. She has been a Connecticut resident for a very, very long time. She taught at Yale for a number of years, and she's now a professor of writing at Wesleyan. This book is about the diagnosis that her beloved husband, Brian Amici, received in the summer of 2019, that he had Alzheimer's. And Brian Amici, just to step back for anyone who has been in the New Haven area for a while, might know, went to Yale. He was a star football player, was on a championship team in the 70s, and got an architecture degree and came back to New Haven and was a very, very important architect in New Haven for a very long time and was beloved. And the two of them met when they were both married to other people. They fell madly in love. And they had an incredibly, they each left their partners and married each other, and had a very, very happy marriage. And a few years before 2019, Amy Bloom started to notice some changes in him, in his behavior. He started to struggle with his work. He withdrew from his friendships. He started to spend a lot of time in the past. She noticed some change in his handwriting. And finally, she took him for tests and they got this diagnosis. And within a few days, he had decided that he did not want to deteriorate. And I'm trying to think of the best ways to put all of this. He asked her to help him figure out how he could end his life, and then told her he wanted her to write about it. So the book is about their love and their relationship. It is about what the few years before his diagnosis was doing to their relationship. It is about her research into finding him a way to die with dignity. It turns out the right to die statutes that are on the books in several states in this country are incredibly narrowly written, and he didn't qualify. And about her finding a place in Switzerland outside of Zurich, about the onerous paperwork that was involved in getting the green light to go to Zurich. And actually they went in January of 2020. So you can ponder that, as I have, what would have happened if there had been delays. And she does share what the few days that they had together in Switzerland were like, and what the end of his life was like, and about her friend flying to Zurich to fly back with her. I get very choked up even when I talk about this.
It's hideously expensive.
Yes, thank you.
And-
That is true. It was $10,000. The fee to the place in Switzerland was $10,000.
It's like Veritas or something is the name.
It's called Dignitas.
Dignitas.
Veritas is Harvard.
Yeah, I looked into it.
It's called Dignitas. The fee is $10,000. Her sister, her very, very supportive sister, gave her a lot of money, so they were able to travel in great comfort to go. And she goes through his funeral, which was at the Stony Creek Library. They live right across the street. And I love this book. I mean, she's a great writer. I've read her novels. I've read her short stories. I think this is the best thing she's ever done. She is going to be in conversation with Roxanne Cody tomorrow at 6 p.m. That's free. You can register. It's virtual. If you want to hear her, I can't imagine what it's going to be like to hear her talk about this, but I have registered. You don't have to buy the book to attend that. the publishers actually sent me a finished copy of this book several weeks ago, and I made a point of reading it because I had a feeling I was going to want to put it in here, and it's very worthy. And I think it's a very important topic. So obviously it's not light and fun, but it's beautiful, and it's important, and it's coming out tomorrow. I don't know why. There we go. Good.
Cindy, excuse me.
Yes.
I
Yes.
believe she's going to be on NPR tomorrow around noon as well.
I'm not surprised. I mean, tomorrow is the publication
Right.
day, so she's probably going to have a big day tomorrow.
Yep.
I think this book is going to get a lot of attention because this is not an issue that's going to go away. And I think it's an issue that's going to become even more significant over
Right.
time.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Next book is a much a funnier book, I think, is called Ancestor Trouble, and it's by Maud Newton, who is a writer of and a literary critic. But this is her first book. It's coming out on March 29th. It was on, I should say as an aside, there's sort of 15 to 20 newspapers and magazines and journals whose book thoughts I value and I follow quite regularly. And all of them release their lists of the most anticipated books of the year, or most anticipated books of the fall, or their best books of the year, all of that kind of stuff. And so this particular book showed up on 9 of those lists. And it's the ancestry research industry has become a multi-billion-dollar industry in this country. So Maud Newton's book is about that and about her use of this new technology that we have with 23andMe and Ancestry.com and all the rest of that stuff to make sense of her own family history. And here's what I want to tell you about her family. Her mother's father, who grew up in Texas during the Great Depression, is purported to have had been married 13 times and to have been shot by one of his wives. His father killed a man with a hay hook and died in a mental institution. She can trace on her mother's side her ancestors back to women who were accused of being witches in Puritan Massachusetts. So she's got religious fanaticism and mental illness threaded through her ancestors all the way on her mother's side. Her father, who was an aerospace engineer who became a lawyer, was a huge fan of the institution of slavery and obsessed about the purity of his family's bloodlines, which also went all the way back to Revolutionary era times. Her mother had 30 rescue cats and founded a church in their living room where she performed exorcisms. Okay, so regardless of what Maud Newton learns through ancestry or says about the industry, I want to read this book because that is some incredible genetic line that she's got. But the point of her book is that we have to confront instead of looking at that and show she said, oh my God, what kind of person am I going to be from that gene pool? And she's like, no, we need to understand our ancestors as complicated human beings rather than some stereotype of some crazy thing. And that's going to help us understand ourselves better. So this book is about that. It's about how you do the research, how you get to learn what you learn about your past and your DNA, and how you can not dismiss your ancestors, but use what you can learn about them to understand yourself. And again, people are all over this one. And I think it sounds just terrific. Why did that happen? I have no idea why that happened. Okay, in a minute, I'm going to give up on this technology. There we go. The next book is, I think, objectively, of all of the 20 books I'm talking about, the book that is the most hyped, unless you want to talk about Dolly Parton again. This is The Candy House by Jennifer Egan. It was on 15 of my 15 to 20 most significant, most anticipated books of the year lists. This is Jennifer Egan's 6th novel. Her 4th novel is called A Visit from the Goon Squad. It won the Pulitzer Prize and the National Book Critics Circle Award. And her 5th, Manhattan Beach, won the Andrew Carnegie Medal for Excellence, which is the Librarian's Prize for Best Book. So it's near and dear to my heart. She has an incredible cult following. People obsess over her. I've read The Candy House, so I understand what they're talking about. She's a very, very talented writer. And A Visit from the Goon Squad has a massive cult following, and The Candy House is not a sequel to it, but it is a sibling to it, which is to say, there are characters who cross-pollinate both novels. And so we see in The Candy House, we see characters from Goon Squad in the past and in the future. But you don't need to have read A Visit from Goon Squad to read The Candy House. And I think when I tell you the premise of this book, you're going to want to. It opens with a brilliant tech guru named Bix Boughton, whose company is one of the mega successful tech companies of the time. This is 2010 when it opens. Bix is very happily married. He has 4 children, but he's on the look for the next new thing. He's ready for the next new big tech breakthrough. And he lives in New York City, and he's up at Columbia, and he goes to a gathering of Columbia professors and grad students and finds out that one of them is working on the idea of downloading or externalizing memory. And he thinks that is an amazing concept. And he develops a new technology called Own Your Unconscious, which allows you to access every memory you've ever had, which is that's right there is enough. But no, because this is the world we live in, you can share those memories with others in exchange for access to the memories of the others that you've shared your memories with. So just sit with that for a minute and think about that. Okay, so the book is about the development of that technology. That happens very early in the book, and the rest of the novel is about the consequences of Own Your Unconscious through the lives of multiple intersecting characters over the next several decades. Okay, it's disturbing, I'm not going to lie, but you can imagine it in a world that is really not far removed from our own. It's going to be a big, big deal, and it's coming out April 5th. I'm going to, if I can't, that's one too far. There we go. Next book, Sea of Tranquility by Emily St. John Mandel, also coming out on April 5th. And I can give you as a sneak peek, it is the #1 April pick of Indie Next, which is a consortium of all independent bookstores. So an equally, because I just saw the April list, an equally big book. This is also, just like Jennifer Egan, Emily St. John Mandel's 6th novel. And she also is probably best well known for her 4th novel called Station 11, which was a massive bestseller in 2014, and then got rediscovered in 2020 because Station 11 is about a swine flu pandemic and the aftermath of that. And so it was the sort of thing that people thought in 2020, hey, some authors were already imagining a pandemic world. I need to read this. And it got rediscovered, and it's now a series on HBO. And it's very good, actually. Sea of Tranquility is a book about time travel, but not, and you're going to hear me talk about time travel a little bit later. Emily St. John Mandel writes speculative or dystopic fiction. She writes fictions that are set in a future that is not necessarily the future we would want, and is a little unsettling. This one takes place in the past, the present, and the future. Three different characters who live in three different centuries all experience the same moment at the same time. And in the far future, there is a time institute that knows about that. There's some glitch, and they send someone to investigate. This is being described as a mashup of historical fiction, science fiction, and autofiction, which is what I call metafiction, which means the authors, one of the main characters has experiences that are remarkably similar to the author's own, which is a creative device I find very, very clever. And it intersects with characters from Station 11 and with her last novel, The Glass Hotel, which came out in 2020 and was very, very good. So there's a lot of interest in this one. And I think it's going to be as successful as, why does this happen? Okay, you know what? I was trying a different way to do the slideshow than I've done in the past, and I'm just so unhappy with how it's going that we're going to do it old school, because I'm not enjoying this technological kerfuffle. So bear with me for just a second. I'm scrolling. Okay. Now, we won't have any more technological glitches. I'm going to keep it this size. Okay, I'm not going to make it big, and you're all just going to be able to see the cover, and we're going to go from there. The next book is The Trayvon Generation by Elizabeth Alexander, which is also coming out on April 5th, and I've also read this one. Elizabeth Alexander is truly a Renaissance woman. She's an author, a poet, an educator, a scholar, and a cultural advocate. She was a professor and the head of the African American Studies Department at Yale for 15 years. She wrote an incredible memoir called Light of the World about her time in New Haven and her husband's sudden death at the age of 50 from a heart attack and what that was like. She wrote Praise Song for the Day, which was the poem at President Obama's first inauguration in 2009, and she recited it at that inauguration. So chances are you've actually seen her and listened to her work or read her work. She left Yale after her husband's death and was professor at Columbia for a few years, and she is now the president of the Andrew Mellon Foundation, which is the largest contributor and supporter of the arts, I think, in this country. So she's an important figure. In the summer of 2020, after the murders of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, and Ahmaud Arbery, and in the midst of the civil unrest that followed all of that, she wrote an essay in the New Yorker called The Trayvon Generation, which was about a reflection on the challenges facing young Black people in America today. The essay went viral, which I mean, I think, to be fair, any essay at that time that spoke to this issue was going to go viral. If you remember, we could not keep books about race on the shelves of the library. They were all topping the New York Times bestseller list. Everyone was desperate to understand and to try to learn. But she's an exceptional writer, and this was a very, very poignant essay. And as has happened in the past, when New Yorker essays have gone viral, they've asked her to turn it into a book, and this is the book she turned it into. So it's about the persistence of race as an ongoing issue at the center of American life. She looks to the past, she looks to the future, she uses art to illustrate what's going on. She talks a lot about New Haven, I don't know if you remember that a few years ago, an employee of Yale broke the stained glass windows in one of the residential colleges because those stained glass windows had a depiction of slavery in them. She talks about other portraits around Yale that have similar depictions because Yale's founders had slaves, and what that means and what the university is doing as an illustration of the issue facing this country. This is the only book I'm talking about from the History and Politics handout. And it's very, very worthy and not very long, I might add. Okay. Next book. Viola Davis has written a memoir called Finding Me that is coming out on April 26th. This book has been on my watch list for at least a year and a half, if not 2 years. There's been rumors that she's writing a memoir, and she has finally written it, and it is coming out next month. I hope everyone knows who she is. She is an incredibly talented actress. She is the first Black actor to have scored the triple crown of acting. She has an Oscar, an Emmy, and actually 2 Tonys. But what people probably don't know is that she grew up incredibly poor, first in South Carolina and then in Rhode Island. Her father was a horse trainer who was violent and an alcoholic. Her mother was a maid and a factory worker and ultimately a civil rights activist. Viola was the 5th of 6 children, and the book is about her life and the hardships of her life and what brought her through to where she is today. She said her hope is that her story will inspire people to light up their own lives with creative expression and rediscover who they were before the world put a label on them. And so I think, she's Viola Davis. So this will be a big book. Okay, this has been heavy. The next book is a present. And this is from the Beach Reads handout. Emily Henry is now one of those writers who can successfully deliver the perfect book for you to take away on vacation and read and feel good about and then not care about again. And I think we all need those kinds of books in our lives from time to time. This is her 3rd book in as many years. Her first book was actually called Beach Read and was about a writer of literary fiction and a writer of romance novels who have cabins next to each other at a retreat and who are both suffering from writer's block and decide that they're going to let each other write a draft of their next books and see who can do a better job. So the literary fiction guy is going to write a romance novel, and the romance gal is going to write a literary fiction book. And it's adorable. The 2nd book, which came out last summer, is called The People We Meet on Vacation. And it's a little bit of a When Harry Met Sally, 2 best friends who go on vacation together and of course actually have feelings for each other and how that plays out. Her new book is coming out on May 3rd. It's called Book Lovers. She is a cutthroat literary agent who is very, very successful and is a workaholic. He is a book editor, a sort of nerdy, frumpy book editor who has had the temerity to turn down one of her author's books. She hates him, and they wind up on vacation together in the same small town in North Carolina where her sister has brought her because she thinks she needs to chill out. If you're looking for a happy but not bad, but well-written and engaging book. This is the one. It's on 11 most anticipated lists. And it's basically a surefire hit. Okay. The next book is called Love Marriage, and it's by Monica Ali, and it's coming out May 3rd. As an aside, the Women's Prize for Fiction is a book prize that was, I promise I'll tell you why I've digressed here. A book prize that was developed 26 years ago because the Booker Prize was just continuing to be into the early 90s, heavily slanted towards men, and women writers had had enough. And the Women's Prize for Fiction is for any novel written in English by a woman, and has become, over the 26 years, one of the most important literary prizes in the English-speaking world. The long list for that prize is being released tomorrow morning, and it is widely expected, although no one knows, that this book is going to be on it. It is already out in the UK and getting rave reviews. Monica Ali has written a lot of novels and is best known for her 23 novel Brick Lane, which was shortlisted for the Booker and a finalist for several other prestigious awards and a massive bestseller and turned into a movie. But she has written almost nothing since then, and nothing at all in the last 10 years. This is a big book about contemporary life in London, and I would say by extension contemporary life in any cosmopolitan city. The core relationship at issue is between two young doctors. She is the daughter of parents who immigrated to the United Kingdom from India. Their marriage is an arranged marriage. He is a very successful GP and a total matriarch, and her mother is a stay-at-home housewife. And she is engaged to another young doctor who is the son of wealthy white upper-class British people, with an interesting twist, which is that his mother is a notorious feminist. And so the book is about those families intersecting, and mostly about what this young Indian woman thinks about marrying into this wealthy British family and the idea of a love marriage instead of an arranged marriage. It's people, the reviews are over the top gushing about how much people love this book. I really can't wait to read it, and it sounds very, very much of the moment. Okay, this one is also present. The next book is called This Much Is True. It's by Miriam Margolis, and it's coming out May 10th. If you can see this face, maybe I'll make this one. Well, I don't want to mess up the technology again. She should look familiar to you, Miriam Margolis, even if you're not sure why. You should look at her and say, I've seen her in something. I know her somehow. She is an award-winning veteran of the theater and of movies and of TV shows. Probably, I'm guessing you if you are looking at her and saying she looks familiar, it's either because you watch Call the Midwife. She's Sister Mildred on Call the Midwife, or you've seen the Harry Potter movies because she's Professor Sprout. She was also in The Age of Innocence, if you remember the amazing Martin Scorsese film with Daniel Day-Lewis and Michelle Pfeiffer. And she was spectacular in that. But she has been around and done everything. If you heard her voice, you might also recognize her because she's done a ton of voiceover work. The reason I included, there's two reasons why I included this book on this list, and it's her memoir. The first is that it was the third best-selling book in the UK in 2021, which is not a nothing. And the second is that I have watched her be interviewed about this book. She is out of control. She is the raunchiest. I can't even, she has no filter whatsoever. You have to, if you've heard, there's a late night talk show host in the UK named Graham Norton. Write this down. He's like Jimmy Kimmel, I guess, or Jimmy Fallon, but the shows are much looser because they drink on the shows. You can see they're sitting there with the drinks, and they're drinking, and there is nothing off limits on these shows. If you go to YouTube and you Google Graham Norton, Miriam Margolis, you won't believe what comes up. Here are some of the things that are in this book. You find out how being conceived in an air raid gave her curly hair, what pranks led her to being known as the naughtiest girl Oxford High School ever had, how she ended up posing nude for Augustus John as a teenager, and what happened next after Warren Beatty asked her, "Do you fuck?" Okay, I have to read this book. We all have to read this book and then get together at some bar and talk about this book. She is just, I mean, you sit there with your mouth hanging open, listening to the things coming out of her mouth. And she's just having the time of her life. So anyway, it took forever for this book to come out in the US, and it's just going to be a hoot and a half. Okay. This next book is probably of the 20, the book that I would personally pick if there were a bookshelf of all 20, and someone said, which one do you want to read first? This is probably the one I would read first, except I've already read a few of them, so it's a cheat. It's called This Time Tomorrow. It's by Emma Straub, and it's coming out on May 17th. Emma Straub has written 4 novels. They're all wonderful, and she's had they're called All Adults Here, The Vacationers, Modern Lovers, and Laura Lamont's Life in Pictures. And she has a short story collection called Other People We Married, which is a great title. But the real reason I love her, apart from that she's a really good writer that's very tapped into Americans today, is that she and her husband own an independent bookstore in Brooklyn called Books Are Magic, which is really great. This one is on 12 of my top most anticipated books of 2022 lists. And it is a time travel novel, not in a science fiction sense, but in the way of a lot of books lately, which are basically focused on the concept of a do-over. That's a very, very popular trope in fiction today. What if we could go back and do something differently? What if we could go back and fix something? This book is about a woman who is just about to turn 40. She has a pretty good life. She lives in Brooklyn. She has a nice boyfriend. She has a nice job. She's an admissions officer at the posh high school that she went to. Her father, who she is very, very close with and loves very much, is quite ill. And he's also a very successful novelist. And she finds out that her high school ex, who she was crazy about, has a son who's applying to the school where she's an admissions officer. And that makes her remember what prompted their breakup, which was at her Sweet 16, when she found out he was cheating on her. And she has her 40th birthday party. She gets ripping drunk. And when she wakes up the next morning, she is 16 again, but 40 in her head. And it's about to be her Sweet 16. And she sets about to get to the bottom of what was going on with that boyfriend, who cares about the guy she's been seeing back in her 40s, and to see if she can correct something that would alter her father's illness. The book is about love, death, New York City, and how the choices we make stay with us forever. And the early reviews are comparing it very, very favorably to The Midnight Library, which was a notable 20 if not last spring, then the spring before, and is still on the New York Times bestseller list. So if this is being compared favorably to that, you know this is going to be a thing. The next book is my short story collection offering for you all. It's called You Have a Friend in 10A, and it's by Maggie Shipstead. Maggie Shipstead is the author of 3 novels. This is her first short story collection. I am a massive fan of her debut novel, Seating Arrangements, which won the LA Times Book Prize for First Fiction and netted her a Dylan Thomas Prize. Her second novel was very good. Also, it was called Astonish Me, but it is her third novel that has made her famous in the literary fiction world, and that's called Great Circle, which was a big doorstop of a book that came out last year and was shortlisted for the Booker Prize. And so because she's arrived and she's got this short story collection coming out fast on the heels of that Booker Prize shortlist, I think that among all the short story books in that handout, this is probably the biggest one. Here's a review. Several of the stories left me wanting to spend more time in the world and with the characters, providing just a taste of what could be a complete novel. Each story is completely different from the others in the collection, evoking unique feelings and experiences. So that's about as good as you can get for a short story collection review. I could tell you what some of them are about, but it does, I mean, there's about 2 Olympic athletes who spend a single night together in the village, in the Olympic Village. It's about a honeymoon in Romania that goes very badly wrong, and the title story is about a child actress that's breaking with her life in Hollywood. But they just, she's very, very good, and this has gotten some great reviews. Okay, next book, Tracy Flick Can't Win by Tom Perrotta. In 1998, Tom Perrotta wrote a novel called Election about a type A, cutthroat, ambitious high school senior who was determined to become student body president. And that was made into a massively successful and Academy Award nominated movie starring Reese Witherspoon. He has decided, and he's written a lot of other stuff that has been, he wrote a book called Little Children, which was made into an Academy Award nominated film. He wrote a book called The Leftovers, which is a big TV series on HBO. But Election, because of the Reese Witherspoon movie, was sort of his best known big book. And 23 years later, he has decided to write a sequel. And we now have that same high school senior, 23 years later, as the middle-aged, I'm not sure I would say middle-aged is that, but okay, go with it, an underappreciated assistant principal at a New Jersey public school who's angling for the top job, and worried that the superintendent of the school district is going to plot against her. This is going to be a dark comedy that skewers the New Jersey suburban world. And I suspect it's going to be a great summer read. It's coming out June 7th. And it will be sort of a delicious with smart book to get you through the summer. Rogues by Patrick Rayden Keefe, which is coming out June 28th. So Patrick Rayden Keefe is basically the most, he has written 2 works of nonfiction, each of which has been among the most highly regarded books of the year they were written, and hugely influential. The first is called Say Nothing, which is about the IRA and the troubles in Ireland. It won the Orwell Prize for political fiction and was a finalist for the National Book Award and for the National Book Critics Circle Award. He followed that up with last year's Empire of Pain about the Sackler family and OxyContin, which has continued to be in the news since he first wrote the New Yorker article that gave rise to the book. That was on 8 of the top best books list of 2021 and won the Bailey Gifford Prize, which is far and away the most prestigious award for a nonfiction book written in English. In his spare time, he is a staff writer for the New Yorker, and this book, Rogues, is a collection of 12 stories of quote unquote skullduggery and intrigue. What he says is these pieces cover some of his most abiding preoccupations: crime and corruption, secrets and lies, the permeable membrane separating licit and illicit worlds, which is a sentence that I just love, the bonds of family, and the power of denial. So we have a profile of a major international arms dealer. We have a profile of a lawyer who defends the worst of the worst, the convicted criminals on death row. We have someone who forges vintage wines that are worth over $100,000 a bottle, about a piece about a whistleblower who exposes money laundering at a Swiss bank, and so on and so on and so on. Everything he writes is fascinating, thoughtfully done, and very well researched. He is an unbelievable talent, and he's on a high right now. So there's already a lot of excitement for this book. The next book is called The Last White Man, a title that should already make you sit up a little bit straighter. It's by Mohsin Hamid, and it is coming out August 2nd. Hamid has written a book of essays and 4 novels, the last of which was a big deal when it came out in 2017, called Exit West, which was about a couple becoming refugees and moving from country to country, ultimately settling in the US, and what that experience did to them. The Last White Man opens as follows. One morning, Anders, a white man, woke up to find he had turned a deep and undeniable brown. Anders, we learn, is a young, fit guy who works out at a gym, who works at a gym in a country that is not named, but is predominantly white. His girlfriend, Una, is a yoga instructor at the gym. And their romance develops as all around them, more people's skin color is starting to darken, and it is about what happens. This obviously is touching on the pulse of the events, not just in America, over the last couple of years, and I think it's going to get a lot of attention. Okay, the last 2 are both along with Candy House and the Patterson, probably the books that will do the best in terms of the New York Times bestseller list. They're both coming out at the very end of August, and I don't have covers for either one. So if you go on Barnes & Noble or Amazon, this is what you will see for the first one. It's called Carrie Soto is Back, and it's by Taylor Jenkins Reid. And the reason I know this is going to be a blockbuster is that Taylor Jenkins Reid, who's written a bunch of novels, has had 3 mega hits in a row with Malibu Rising, Daisy Jones and the Six, and The 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo, that have taken turns rotating through and coming back again to the New York Times bestseller list. So she is just on a total roll. This book, Carrie Soto, of the book, is the most successful female tennis player the tennis world has ever seen. She has shattered every record and won 20 Grand Slam titles. And she has basically, since she was a young child, done nothing but obsess about tennis. So she retires. And 6 years later, we find her in the stands of the 1994 US Open, where she is watching the next female phenom tennis player break her record. And she decides at the age of 37 that she's going to come out of retirement for 1 year to reclaim her record. And the book is about what happens. And because it's, that's already a great premise, but because it's by Taylor Jenkins Reid, it's going to be a massive, massive bestseller. And the last book I'm going to talk about tonight is called The Ink Black Heart, and it is by Robert Galbraith. And I hope that some of you know who Robert Galbraith is in real life. Anyone? Robert Galbraith is J.K. Rowling, an author you've maybe heard of. And writing as Robert Galbraith, she has written this Cormoran Strike series of books. The Ink Black Heart is number 6. She is apparently a huge fan of detective fiction, Agatha Christie especially, and she has said in interviews that she's always wanted to try to write a contemporary whodunit with a credible backstory. These books, again, there are 5. You must read them if you are into great, big, complicated mysteries with a great big cast of characters, all of whom are also complicated. You should get a hold of this series and start going. Cormoran Strike is the main character. He's a detective. He's got a very complicated past. He's a very tenacious guy and very, very good at his job. In the very first book, which is called The Cuckoo's Calling, he hires an assistant named Robin Ellicott. She turns out to have a real knack for this sort of thing. The two of them, needless to say, have some very interesting chemistry. And we are following the trajectory of their friendship over these books. The books are in order, and you have to read them in order because the backstory is really important, just like you would have to read Harry Potter in order. The Cuckoo's Calling, The Silkworm, Career of Evil, Lethal White, and Troubled Blood. Those are the first 5. They've been made into very, very successful television series in the UK. I don't know why that series hasn't come here yet. I don't know anything at all about The Ink Black Heart, but I don't think it matters. What I can tell you is that I've read the other 5. They're really, really good. They're long. The rumor is that The Ink Black Heart is 900 pages. Troubled Blood, which was 600 or 700, was, I thought, the best of the 5, which is saying something. It means she's getting better as she's going. This one is coming out just like Carrie Soto is back on August 30th. And I think it's the perfect Labor Day weekend read. Okay, those are, thank God I'm done. Those are the 20 notable titles for the spring and summer of 2022. Thank you for the silent clapping, since all of you were on mute. Clapping is not necessary. Just seeing your smiling faces is enough for me. Take yourself off mute for a second if you are in the mood. I would love to hear from you which one of those 20 books, first of all, any overall reactions you have or any questions you have, obviously, but also which one of those 20 books you would pull off a bookshelf first to read if you had them all in front of you.
Amy Bloom,
Amy Bloom, who said that?
Marcy.
Yeah,
I agree.
it's not very long. Not very long. I see a couple of you doing this. I think it's around 200 pages, give or take. It's a book to read somewhere quiet, where you can just sort of let it wash over you. It's beautiful. Others books you're interested in?
Yeah, I would agree with Amy Bloom. I have a personal family connection to that. I don't think I could read it at this point. So I would say the book that I would grab would be Finding Me by Viola Davis. I established such a connection to her in the movie Doubt. She had a part.
Oh yes, she was wonderful.
She was so authentic, and I believe she had she brought a piece of herself to that role.
Yeah,
And it
she-
wasn't, she didn't have a lot of time. You know, when I say time, air time, so to speak, just incredible. And, you know, other movies, films she was in, I've seen her in a lot of interviews and a lot of different segments, and she's incredible. And I'd love to read her memoir and about her life. And yeah, that would be mine. My
Great.
pick.
Thank you, Karen. Yep, I saw Marie put her thumb up for that
Yeah.
as well. Mary.
Only because I'm a Dolly Parton fan. I'm Rose Front. The woman's a national treasure.
There you go. And she's incredibly generous with bookstores and support, a huge supporter and a big supporter of the coronavirus vaccine too. So she's a very interesting woman. Tisha Rossi put in the chat to everyone, I have seen Miriam Margolis play important supporting actors in many things and can just imagine she'd be a real character in real life. Tisha, I'm telling you, Google her and on Graham Norton and you're in for a treat. And Charmaine said she's also looking forward to the Viola Davis book. Any other reactions? Any other thoughts?
I didn't see any historical fiction in there.
Well, Booth is historical fiction.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
I
Yeah,
would
that's
like
true.
to.
That's true. Yeah.
All the historical fiction, Marcy, is in the other fiction handout, and
Okay.
there's plenty of it.
Okay.
But I would put Booth as historical fiction.
Okay.
But yeah, there's plenty of the World War II historical fiction and some World War I historical fiction. Again, come if you want physical copies of any of the handouts, just let me know. If you want a physical, I know you were probably taking notes, but if you want the actual 2-page sheet of the 20 notable titles, I can give that to you. I can give that to you, or I can email that to you. That is something it's just a normal 8.5 by 11, so you could print it.
I would like
Just,
that, definitely.
Can you
Sandy, you
email
want
it?
that?
Yes.
Okay.
Email?
I didn't send it to you ahead of time because that would have ruined the big reveal of my 20 titles,
Yeah,
technological difficulties notwithstanding. But if you actually want the physical, a PDF or an actual printout, just let me know. Okay. Thank you all so much